Tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, these are all terrifying, uncontrollable, and often unpredictable. These natural disasters sweep away everything in their path. They can leave behind massive destruction, knock out power across an entire state, and flood streets and cities. But in today's story, a major hurricane in Florida became a colossal obstacle in the path of a double crime investigation, giving the villain a chance to escape justice. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 storm, devastated the city. But as it turned out, it wasn't the natural disaster that took the lives of a woman named Rita and her daughter Lisa Ann Botto. And before we get started, be kind enough to support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. I will be very grateful to you for that. Let's get started. One of the main characters in today's story is Rita. She was born and raised in Torrington, Connecticut. Shortly after finishing school, Rita married James Botto, and they had 2 children, a son, Alan, and a daughter, Lisa Ann. The young woman happily gave up her job and dedicated herself to motherhood. She took great joy in raising her children, investing her time, energy, and love in them. Rita wasn't just a mother. She was the most devoted protector of her son and daughter, always supporting and encouraging their every endeavor. However, when Alan and Lisa started school, Rita found herself alone in the silence of an empty house. To fill this void, the woman decided to take up something new and accepted a job as a school bus driver with a local company. This work brought her an unexpected sense of joy. She devoted the next decade to this new field. Rita wasn't just a school bus driver. She helped busy parents by safely delivering their children to school. Not everyone loves their job, but Rita genuinely enjoyed it. She watched her little passengers, saw them grow up, and took pride in their achievements, which the students often eagerly shared with her on the ride home. Rita built a friendly rapport with the kids, earning not only the respect of her colleagues, parents, and students, but also becoming something of an older friend to the school children themselves. Yet her true calling remained motherhood. Rita was especially close to her daughter. Lisa Ann, while in high school, became passionate about tennis. She trained hard, attended practices, but often lost due to stiff competition. Still, the schoolgirl refused to give up, diligently working on her strokes. Lisa set a goal to become the top tennis player in her graduating class. She spent endless hours training, refining her technique, pushing herself to the limit. And all that hard work finally paid off when Lisa won the championship title. It was the sweetest victory after so many disappointments and losses. Beyond her love for tennis, Lisa's true passion was baking. She had a special talent for turning various ingredients into delicious treats. The girl often surprised her friends and family with her creations and secretly dreamed of one day becoming a professional pastry chef, working on a cruise ship, traveling the world, and crafting unique desserts for guests. Lisa loved the idea of meeting people from all walks of life and cultures, delighting them with edible works of art. But that was just the beginning, as the high schooler's dreams stretched far into the future. Someday, Lisa dreamed of opening her own bakery, not only to showcase and monetize her talents, but also to share her knowledge and skills with aspiring pastry chefs and pass on her experience. Lisa Ann wasn't just attractive on the outside. Sparkling blue eyes, tanned skin, and long blonde hair. The girl had a wonderful personality. Despite some shyness and reserve, she possessed undeniable charm. When meeting new people, she needed time to start trusting and come out of her shell. Yet Lisa was always very positive, finding the bright side in any situation and seeing only the best qualities in others. Of course, she had friends at school, but her closest companion was always her mom. The same was true for Alan. Their relationship was less like that of parents and children, and more like the unbreakable bond and love found between best friends. In 1991, as Lisa was finishing high school, the family underwent significant changes. After 22 years of marriage, Rita made the difficult decision to divorce James. It wasn't easy, but she felt the separation was inevitable. For the first time in years, Rita had to navigate her problems on her own. She still had 2 grown children to care for. In addition to her job as a school bus driver, the woman took a position as a cashier at a local convenience store to make ends meet. Soon, her son Alan enlisted in the army, leaving all the household responsibilities on his mother's shoulders. Despite the heavy burden, Rita remained strong and never showed how hard it was for her. She didn't want her daughter to see her struggles. Parents often want to be superheroes for their kids and fear disappointing them. In short, the divorce from her husband had a profound impact on Rita. She developed a desire to leave Torrington, Connecticut, and start a new chapter in her life. The only thing holding her back was her daughter, Lisa. The mother worried it would be hard for the girl to leave her friends, her routine, and move to a new city. But she herself had long wanted to move forward and leave behind everything tied to tender memories of a happy marriage. Rita shared her thoughts with her daughter and hit the mark. It turned out Lisa was on the same page and ready for a change. She too often dreamed of living by the ocean in a state with warm weather year-round, where she could swim and play tennis all the time. Rita's brother, Thomas, had recently moved to Florida, to Boynton Beach, with his wife. It was their excitement and joy about life in a warm climate that caught Rita's attention and made her consider relocating. With her daughter's support, the woman began exploring different towns in South Florida. She wanted to live close enough to her brother Thomas, but also find a place where Lisa could play tennis. Eventually, she narrowed her search to a small town near West Palm Beach called Lantana. The town sat on the coast with sandy beaches. It offered a laid-back, year-round vacation vibe, where it was almost always warm and sunny. Palm Beach County meant sprawling estates, stunning beaches, and multi-million-dollar waterfront homes. The state of Florida was a place that drew countless tourists. People came there to enjoy the sun, ocean, and relaxation. But Rita and Lisa were heading to Florida to stay for good. Lantana in Palm Beach County seemed like the perfect spot for the mother and daughter, promising a sea of new experiences. They picked out the ideal apartment with spacious rooms, large closets, and a back patio. The apartment was on the first floor. Nearby was a lake where residents could go boating or fishing. Plus, there was a tennis court, which proved to be the deciding factor in choosing the place. But the biggest issue with Lantana and Florida as a whole was the region's vulnerability to hurricanes. Powerful tropical cyclones formed over warm ocean waters, bringing destructive winds, torrential rains, and towering waves that threatened the lives and property of residents. South Florida, and Lantana in particular, sitting on the Atlantic coast, was especially prone to such natural disasters during hurricane season, which typically ran from June to November. A key factor to consider was the potential danger of destruction. It ranged from flooding to fierce hurricane winds. While Florida's coastal communities often took steps to prepare for hurricanes and mitigate their effects, the risk of facing a natural disaster was the greatest fear and the biggest challenge for Rita and Lisa. Of course, the women weighed the pros and cons of moving to the region, but ultimately, the advantages outweighed the drawbacks, and the mother and daughter began preparing to relocate to sunny Lantana. Their impending move was met with concern from relatives, who were adamantly against the idea. They knew Rita often struggled with low self-esteem and had heavily relied on her ex-husband James for support in many areas of her life. Loved ones worried that she might face serious challenges and be unprepared for them. Though Rita was hardworking, managing finances had never been her strong suit. In the end, the move happened. The mother and daughter settled into a first-floor apartment with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms with monthly rent. The place wasn't cheap, but the presence of a tennis court where Lisa could practice justified the high cost. The lives of the 2 women spun into a whirlwind of activity. Lisa devoted countless hours to training and improving her game. To help her mom and herself financially, the girl took a part-time job at a popular restaurant. Lisa was proud to contribute to the household. She managed to balance work, tennis, and school. She had recently bought a brand new sports car. Her next goal was to enroll in the Florida Culinary Institute to kickstart her career as a trendy pastry chef. Rita Botto found a job as a cashier at a Walmart near the beach. They were settling into their new home and even adopted 2 cats from a shelter named Doc and Freddie, who quickly became family favorites. The mother and daughter attended church together. Everything was going great. The Botto family had no reason to suspect their lives would soon end tragically. In fact, Rita's life as a free woman was just beginning. She had raised her kids and could finally enjoy some time for herself. A little over a year had passed since they moved to Florida. On the evening of August 21st, 1992, Lisa had a date planned with a coworker named David. The guy worked as a cook at the same restaurant as she did. They returned to their restaurant, but this time as guests, to celebrate Lisa's belated 20th birthday. Her actual birthday was July 2nd, but due to conflicting schedules, they hadn't been able to meet up and mark the occasion. David and Lisa agreed on 8 p.m. Over the past few months, the two had taken a couple of walks along the waterfront, and the restaurant meetup was their first official date. They chatted pleasantly, discussing Lisa's car purchase, her love for tennis, and life in Florida. The evening was filled with carefree conversation and the awkward excitement typical of a first date. Around 10:30 p.m., David walked Lisa to her car, parked on a nearby street. They hugged goodbye. Lisa smiled and said they were parting for just a few hours and would see each other at work tomorrow. Neither of them could have imagined it would be their first and last date. All week, Lantana residents had been trying to figure out if Hurricane Andrew would hit their town. Hurricane Andrew was a powerful Atlantic tropical cyclone, the 3rd strongest hurricane to ever strike the continental United States. It formed on August 16, 1992. Initially, forecasts predicted it would make landfall near Jupiter, Florida, on August 25th. That was about an hour's drive from Lantana, where Rita and Lisa lived. However, the storm's strength and speed were underestimated. Ultimately, Hurricane Andrew hit the shore in South Florida and was set to pass directly over Lantana. The town's residents had a few days left to prepare. The next evening, on August 22nd, around 7 p.m., Rita's brother, Thomas, got a call from a worried coworker at the Walmart store who told him Rita hadn't shown up for her shift and hadn't even called in. Thomas tried reaching his sister and niece by phone, but couldn't get through. He realized something out of the ordinary had happened and decided to head to their apartment to make sure Rita and Lisa were okay. The storm was approaching, and the weather was already turning bad, so Thomas was concerned for his sister. Along with his wife, he set out for her place, already sensing something was wrong. He hoped, of course, that he'd arrive and not see Rita's car outside. That would mean his sister and niece had left, escaping the hurricane, but unfortunately, Rita's car was parked in the driveway. Thomas's heart sank. He knew if Rita were home and everything was fine, she'd have answered his calls. As he walked from the car to the door, dozens of thoughts raced through his mind. He tried to find a possible explanation for his sister's silence. Thomas knocked on the front door, and no one answered. His worry grew even stronger. Since he had a spare key, he used it and peeked into the living room. Something terrible had clearly happened there. Items were scattered across the floor, and his panic mounted. The man quickly searched the apartment, and when his gaze landed on the hallway floor leading to the master bedroom, he noticed his sister's legs sticking out from the doorway. At that moment, Thomas's wife approached the front door, deciding to come inside too. He reached out to stop her. He knew it was better for his wife not to see what had happened inside the apartment. Even Thomas, who had served in the army for several years, wasn't prepared for the scene he found in Rita and Lisa's home. A wave of horror washed over him as he realized his niece and sister were most likely dead. Thomas ran out of the apartment, grabbed his wife, and frantically rushed to find a phone to call 911. Within minutes, police arrived. They confirmed Thomas's worst fears. Rita and Lisa had died as a result of an attack. Law enforcement officers taped off the crime scene perimeter and secured the area. The first thing the detectives noticed, there were no signs of a break-in. The sliding glass door was locked. Thomas had opened the front door with his key. The investigators walked through the apartment and realized solving the crime wouldn't be easy. This made them nervous. The thing was, a storm was approaching. It was unclear how much damage it would cause. They could lose all potential evidence. The apartment might flood. The wind could tear down walls or rip off the roof, or it might even destroy the building entirely. And perhaps the police would never crack this case. Before collecting any evidence, the detectives decided to record the crime scene on video. The attack most likely took place in the living room. Furniture items were strewn across the floor. In the kitchen, all the cabinets were open, as if someone had been searching for something. Yet, at first glance, it didn't look like the house had been robbed. At the entrance to the master bedroom lay the body of an adult woman, face down. It was the 45-year-old apartment owner, Rita Botto. She was dressed in a cotton nightgown. There was an obvious gunshot wound to the back of her head. The victim's arms were stretched above her head, with clear marks on them. It seemed her hands had been tied, though no rope was on them now. The entire bedroom was splattered with blood. 20-year-old Lisa Botto lay on the bed, face up. Her lifeless, fully naked body had been left in a rather degrading pose. Her legs were deliberately spread apart, and her face was covered with a pillow. Judging by the pools of blood on the floor near the bed, this wasn't the position she died in. The killer had intentionally moved her body to further humiliate her. Before that, the victim had clearly been assaulted. Marks on Lisa's arms suggested she'd been tied up too. There were so many clues in this apartment that the investigators knew it would take hours to piece everything together and form a theory about why these women had been killed. But Hurricane Andrew was set to hit Lantana's shore within the next 48 hours. So the detectives hurried, trying to document as much evidence as possible in case anything was ultimately destroyed by the weather. Several key pieces of evidence stood out. A pillow from the living room couch had 2 distinct bullet holes. It had surely been used as a silencer. Investigators also found a bloody fingerprint on a sheet and several hairs that didn't match Rita's or Lisa's. On the bathroom counter sat a kitchen knife next to a hairbrush. Though no firearm was found at the scene, they discovered a .22 caliber bullet casing. There were marks on a stand where a TV had been, but the TV itself was gone. A VCR had also disappeared. Plus, Lisa's new car, which she'd recently bought, was missing. Investigators wondered, was this a botched robbery? Maybe the thief had been caught off guard by the homeowners? 4 cigarette butts were found in random spots around the apartment, and a 5th was on the floor beneath Rita's body. They were a well-known brand. But the thing was, neither Lisa nor Rita smoked. Given the number of cigarette butts, the perpetrator had been in the apartment for at least half an hour. The upside was that these clues could provide real DNA from the killer. The detectives also noted that a pair of Lisa's classic shoes stood neatly by the apartment's front door. Perhaps the girl, returning from her date the previous night, had deliberately taken off her shoes at the entrance to avoid waking her mom. At that moment, the attacker crept up behind her, and Rita emerged from her bedroom at the sound. As investigators pieced together possible scenarios, Hurricane Andrew drew closer to Lantana. Chaos descended on the town. Residents rushed to stores to stock up on essentials like water, food, batteries, and electronics. Supermarkets were packed with people eager to buy generators to prepare their homes for potential power outages. Many simply didn't know what to expect from the storm. On August 23rd, the day after Rita and Lisa's bodies were found, the girls' missing car turned up in the parking lot of a local club. Inside were Lisa's driver's license and wallet, but the car keys were gone. The car's interior was quickly checked for fingerprints. However, the search yielded nothing. With the storm closing in, they had to act fast. Hundreds of people were bustling about, so there was simply no chance to identify potential witnesses. On top of that, an evacuation order was in effect, and many residents were abandoning their homes to head inland. The investigators first spoke with Lisa's co-workers at the restaurant. David, the guy she'd gone on a date with the night before, was immediately ruled out as a suspect. He had a solid alibi for the night of the crime. David felt deep guilt for not walking the girl home. But what could he have done against a gun? He'd likely have become another victim. Soon, the detectives got their first lead. The tip came from Alan Bado. The young man suspected his own father, James Bado. Alan told police the man didn't seem upset when informed of his ex-wife's and daughter's deaths. James was fixated on money and resented having to pay alimony after the divorce. He'd made it clear he disagreed with the court's ruling. So could the man have taken the lives of two people close to him over money? Investigators planned to speak with James in person, but Hurricane Andrew derailed their plans. Only a few hours remained before the storm hit the town, so the police had to focus on other suspects. The detectives' attention shifted to Rita Bado's neighbor. During questioning, one of the building's residents mentioned a 26-year-old guy named Gary Whitmer, who lived in the apartment above the murdered family and had previously worked at Walmart with Rita. At the time of the crime, Gary was unemployed. He was often seen at the court where Lisa played tennis. Maybe he'd had a romantic interest in the girl and, after being rejected, decided to take revenge. The police were drawn to Gary's car, parked in the lot near the building. Inside, detectives spotted cleaning supplies, which immediately piqued their curiosity. The first thing they noticed was a cigarette tucked behind his ear. It was the same well-known brand as the ones found in the Bado apartment. Plus, the guy got very angry when questioned. He mentioned he'd been friends with Rita and was sad to hear of her death, but Gary never once mentioned Lisa, though he was closer in age to her. The storm was closing in. The detectives didn't have time to get a search warrant. They asked the young man if they could check his apartment, but he flat out refused. They then offered Gary a chance to give an official statement at the station and provide a DNA sample, but he refused that too, claiming he had nothing to do with the murders of his two neighbors. The guy promised to talk to the police only after hiring a lawyer. On top of that, the detectives were temporarily pulled from the investigation and assigned to a task force handling hurricane aftermath, so the case of Rita and Lisa Bado's murders was pushed to the back burner. Investigators had to return to headquarters and start preparing for emergency responses to incoming reports. Hurricane Andrew was one of the most destructive hurricanes in U.S. history. It tore through the northwestern Bahamas, South Florida, and southwestern Louisiana. It made landfall in Florida on August 24, 1992. It was classified as a Category 5, the highest rating on the scale. Andrew caused massive destruction and led to the deaths of at least 65 people across the region. Damage totaled $27 billion. The storm's winds leveled entire neighborhoods, leaving thousands homeless. It toppled trees and power lines and flooded coastal settlements. The investigation into the Bado case resumed only after the hurricane subsided. By then, the killer was far beyond the state's borders, and tracking him down would be very difficult. Rita and Lisa's memorial service took place on August 28th at the church they regularly attended in life. After that, they were cremated and their ashes were returned to their hometown of Torrington, Connecticut, where they were buried. Investigators headed there too, to speak with Rita's ex-husband and the father of Lisa and Alan. It was established that James Bado was in another state on the night of August 22nd and couldn't have been responsible for his daughter's and ex-wife's deaths. But the police suspected he might have hired someone to carry out the killings. Lisa might have been an unintended victim. Detectives dug into James's background, financial ties, and recent activities. They uncovered some intriguing details about his life, but they had no connection to Rita and Lisa's deaths. The investigation hit a dead end. The police had to shift their focus to other theories. This case would surely have drawn far more media attention if not for the hurricane that swept through Lantana. Everyone was busy trying to return to normal life and clean up the storm's aftermath. People were more concerned with their own lives than someone else's death. The Bado's neighbor, Gary Whitmer, vanished without a trace. No one knew where he'd gone during or after the hurricane. The police tried to find new leads and suspects, but there simply weren't any. detectives questioned hundreds of Lantana residents. A neighbor of Rita and Lisa reported seeing a suspicious man near their apartment the day before the murders. He was of average height, with messy blonde hair. He looked about 25 years old. The problem was, the neighbor couldn't recall specific details for an artist to create a sketch. The woman even agreed to hypnosis, but the resulting composite still didn't yield any solid leads. By September, detectives recorded a segment for a crime show, airing a reenactment of the crime on TV, hoping to encourage viewers with information to contact the police. But that didn't produce anything worthwhile either. A year later, authorities repeated the failed effort, discussing the crime on a crime series and showing the hypnosis-generated sketch. Yet again, they got no significant leads in the investigation. In reality, the police had DNA from the presumed killer, taken from the cigarette butts and fingerprints. But this case happened in 1992, when there wasn't a centralized database and technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. The only thing the forensic expert could do was extract the DNA sample and store it in a freezer for better times, which he did. The runaway suspect, Gary Whitmer, Rita and Lisa's neighbor, was finally found in May 1994, in a morgue. The man was discovered in his apartment in Long Island, New York. He died of a drug overdose. Gary's DNA and fingerprints showed he had no connection to his neighbor's deaths. On July 15, 1995, 3 years after Rita and Lisa's deaths, Palm Beach officers made a tragic discovery. A 28-year-old local woman, Denise O'Neil, was found dead in a canal. Her body was wrapped in a pink sheet. The death of another young woman reignited interest in Rita and Lisa's case. The circumstances of Denise's death were eerily similar. She'd been assaulted, too. Her car was stolen and then abandoned. But the most chilling similarity was that the girl worked at the same restaurant as Lisa and had been on a date the night before her death. Such coincidences sparked speculation among investigators and the public that the same killer was at work. However, it soon came to light that Denise O'Neil had been killed by 2 young men who lived near her. They both confessed to the murder. The investigation into Rita and Lisa Bado's deaths hit another dead end. Months passed, then years. A computer system emerged that stored DNA profiles created by federal, state, and local forensic labs across the United States, the CODIS database. Given the brutality of the attack, investigators genuinely believed the killer would strike again, or that it would turn out this wasn't his first crime. And that's what happened. On December 9, 1991, 9 months before Rita and Lisa Bado's deaths, another crime occurred in Lantana. In a small one-story home, the body of 40-year-old Martin Gatt, a clerk, was found on his apartment floor. He'd been stabbed multiple times. His murder shocked his co-workers, as Gatt was known as a diligent employee who got along with everyone and had no enemies. Comparing DNA samples from the crime scenes revealed that the same perpetrator was responsible for both cases. Because different departments handled the cases, the connection between the 2 crimes wasn't established until years later, in 2001. Then came another breakthrough. During a routine check through the CODIS database, an employee found a match with a DNA profile. The sample from the Bado apartment was linked to a prisoner in a Wisconsin jail. He was a 41-year-old drifter convicted of armed robbery, arson, resisting arrest, and selling illegal drugs. His name was James Anthony Frederick. Now that this man was the prime suspect, police traveled to Wisconsin where Frederick was serving a life sentence to question him about the night Rita and Lisa Bado died. But the officers learned nothing useful. James didn't confess to anything. When shown photos of the victims, he said their faces looked vaguely familiar, but he couldn't recall where he might have seen them. Now the police faced a big task to prove James was responsible for the mother and daughter's deaths. In 1992, hair and blood samples were collected from the convict to compare again with evidence from the crime scene. Detectives also ran a background check on James Frederick and found that in 1992, during the attack on the Bados, he'd been living in Lantana. James had an extensive criminal history. He'd been in and out of jail since his teenage years. Frederick moved to Florida after being paroled early from another state. People who knew James, including his brother, described him as a rough, ruthless, and violent man. He had a short temper and could lash out at anyone who disagreed with him even slightly. When James was convicted in Wisconsin for robberies in 1995, he even tried to attack the prosecutor and threatened to kill him. The gun he used in those robberies closely resembled the weapon from the Bado case. Despite a thorough investigation, detectives couldn't establish any direct link between James and the deceased Rita and Lisa. These people had never interacted with each other, but the detectives tracked down a woman James had lived with in Lantana. His ex-girlfriend said that one day he came home in a brand new car matching the description of Lisa's. A TV and VCR were on the back seat. He planned to sell them. That summer, James was heavily into illegal drugs and constantly needed money. The case was piling up with more and more circumstantial evidence. When the DNA analysis results came back, it was confirmed that James Anthony Frederick was indeed responsible for the horrific crimes committed against the Bado family. Though the man insisted on his innocence, the evidence against him was irrefutable. Frederick was to be extradited to Florida for trial. The reason this man attacked and killed the two women would remain known only to James Frederick. The prosecution team theorized that the killer was drawn to Lisa's new car. He figured the girl was well off and there'd be valuables in her home. That's why he waited for Lisa that evening as she returned from her date and attacked her. Hearing the noise, Rita rushed out of her bedroom. The assailant tied both women up and sat them on the living room couch. That's where investigators noticed signs of a struggle. Then he took the TV and VCR from the house before returning to finish what he'd started. It's possible James was under the influence of illegal drugs at the time. The man dragged Lisa to the bedroom, stripped off her clothes, and assaulted her. Since Rita was shot at the bedroom entrance, she might have tried to protect her daughter somehow. Or perhaps James deliberately assaulted the daughter in front of her mother. What really happened can only be guessed. The only person who could shed light on this crime is James. Yet he claimed he didn't remember the whole situation because his mind was clouded by psychoactive substances. In April 2003, James Frederick was charged with the murders of Rita and Lisa Bado. Since Wisconsin didn't have the death penalty, but Florida did, the Wisconsin governor refused to extradite James until Florida agreed not to seek the death penalty against him. The two governors reached an agreement on possible sentencing, and Frederick faced trial in Florida. In the end, James took a plea deal. On November 28, 2005, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder with a firearm and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. And only in October 2006 was James Frederick's DNA matched to evidence in the case of Martin Gatt, the clerk who died in Lantana 9 months before the attack on Rita and Lisa. At that point, James was still serving his sentence in Wisconsin before beginning his life term in Florida, so he had to be extradited again. Ultimately, Frederick never faced trial for the attack on Martin because he was already serving a life sentence. This man would remain in prison until the end of his days, so for the sake of Martin Gatt's family and loved ones, it was decided not to pursue further charges against him. Natural disasters sweep away everything in their path, but sometimes one person can cause just as much devastation, upending the lives of several families. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.